and this is the part we cut out. Fuck.
Fuck.
You can say whatever you want. You can say fuck even during the regular show.
Just make up your own words.
And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Welcome to Odd Reality Radio, the show designed to generate thought through entertainment. Join us as we explore the strange and unexplained, the unanswered and the unbelievable on Odd Reality Radio.
An error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it.
Welcome to Odd Reality Radio. I'm Ty West.
I'm Joshua Ray.
My name's Jared Black.
And today we're going to be discussing the true history of Halloween in Odd Reality Radio's SAMHAIN Special. Stick around. You're not going to want to miss this. Many say that the veil between the living world and the spirit one is thinnest on Halloween, and the origin of that term and the celebrations of this darker fall holiday actually originated in Celtic history, and it wasn't called Halloween at all. It was known as Samhain. What would most commonly be said, Samhain?
Yeah, that's how it looks.
And it's essentially the celebration on the calendar of celebrations or the calendar of festivals in the pagan religion, and according to their calendar that read somewhat like an analog clock. The top point in a lot of cases I was able to find, or the 12 o'clock position, was the celebration of Samhain. And this circular calendar consisted of the 8 cycles of the year, which consisted of the 2 solstices, the 2 equinoxes, and 4 separate cross-quarter days.
It's really interesting, and isn't it mostly based on the, sun and the moon alignment and time of year? And
right.
I think that's, and it also happens to fall on one of those, the equinox or a solstice, or, what is it, the winter solstice?
It's actually in between the winter solstice and the fall
equinox?
Mm-hmm. And the fall equinox.
Oh, it symbolizes end of summer.
So where does this play into the customs we have today of Halloween?
Well,
our perception of it, wearing a costume, trick or treating.
We'll get there. But to describe the culture of the Druids and the Celts a little bit, to kind of give some more clarity, like Josh and I are trying to get to here with, and these pagans, as they're also sometimes referred to, are people that lived somewhere around 2,000 plus years ago, and they lived across northwestern Europe primarily. They were people who believed in a simpler existence that included things of balance, including things like a belief in magic, spirituality in their pagan religion. They believed,
like Wicca and shit.
Yeah,
Exactly.
well, absolutely. That's
Then they live in like
beliefs.
modern day Great Britain, Ireland.
Yes.
That's where I thought they were at.
And these people, well, yes, that's where they lived. And they believed in equality for women. They believed in, the communal feasts. They also believed in transmigration of the soul, which, if you ask me, that was a little bit ahead of their time.
Yeah.
Because there's, it seems that our culture's just now welcoming that possibility in when they seemed to have a more firm understanding.
Stonehenge was built around this time.
You have to
And
look.
they actually
had some
there are modern
factors
druids that I watched a documentary, and modern druids actually do religious celebrations and ceremonies at Stonehenge and other rock formations.
Druids
Well,
can be known like this, the Celts
They
too.
consider it a time of divination, right? Where they can kind of use like Ouija boards and tarot cards more effectively to see into the other realms or predict future events or, marriages or whatever. Like,
Yes.
kind of like the bobbing for apples with a name on it, of a girl's name. And if you got that name, then the chances of you marrying her within the short period of time would be really good. And it was
Right.
what they considered what we would think of as like clairvoyance or ways to see through the veil because it's the thinnest at this time.
Right, yeah. I was going to say maybe that does have something to do with the fact that the veil has always been perceived as being thinner at this time of the year, which makes a lot of sense because if you think about it, the earth itself and the living things on it are almost dying or decaying in a sense, and then, giving way for a rebirth the following spring, but you've got to live through this death of winter.
Exactly. And it's kind of also symbolizing like death and resurrection of your crops, even your harvest,
Yes.
so
Absolutely. That leads me to the next one.
go ahead.
It's now the Celts, they used Samhain as a time for the harvest, like we've discussed, of fruits, vegetables, and they even sacrificed the weakest livestock to provide meat for the long winter months. And so, this was a time for them to celebrate by harvesting. And obviously these are very upright and civilized people.
Giving thanks for the harvest that they were
Exactly.
that they did receive, and that's why I say it's like Thanksgiving all rolled in, and Halloween, because they're also recognizing their dead. It's like almost all the holidays in this one. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And then scaring away or dressing up to seem as though they're part of the other world or whatever.
Yeah.
Trickery.
Well, on that note, it was actually said that with this, quote, summer's end or end of harvest, as Samhain is translated, that they would light these giant bonfires in an effort to drive back the dead. And some accounts say that they would wear masks or costumes, like you're saying, in an effort to drive back the dead because they didn't want them coming with the veil being so thin.
And they also used to actually call it a bonfire.
So did they wear costumes like drive away evil spirits? Is that
they would throw bones in the fire, and those would be sacrifices to appease these, spirits or whatever this superstition was, I guess.
Well, there's a quote that came from Wes Craven, of all people. I was watching some other Halloween stuff, but it surprisingly found relevance in this topic and this specific situation. And the quote was, "The monster can't get you if you are the monster." And that, it was just his reference to Halloween and how we feel and how we've been a culture that just kind of thrives on that concept. And that's what this, reminds me of. These Celts thought that exact same thing. The monsters can't get you. The death can't get you if you can scare it back to the places it should be.
Yeah.
And so, I found that to be a rather interesting.
Well, interesting metaphor there.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's relevant to this day. I mean, it's something that we still, maybe subconsciously, and some of us don't even realize that we're doing it, that we're acting in a way because we want to scare away the things that scare us most.
Yeah.
Some people use Halloween as like a seance to try to communicate with their loved ones or whatever.
That's exactly what, like, they basically Wicca.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did stuff like that.
Well, there's a reason because they say that the veil is thinnest between those two worlds, and so if that's the thinnest and easier to connect with lost loved ones or other ones who've already passed, and try to communicate, basically. And that's why they use cards and whatnot, Ouija board.
Well, now in the 7th century, the church, or the Catholic Church more specifically, their influence was growing, and their dislike of the pagan traditions was enough for them to devise this plan to steal strength from their celebrations by claiming these new religious holidays on and around existing pagan celebrations. For instance, the pagan celebration Lemuria, which falls on May 13th, was actually a celebration for pagans to placate their dead. It was the creepiest celebration of the dead by far, and it's a time that those who celebrated, if you could even call it celebrating, they would pour milk on the graves or leave cakes in an effort to quell the larvae or ghosts of the departed, who they feared might rise up and haunt them. Now, enter the church in 609 AD, and the church co-opted the Lemuria celebration by claiming May 13th is also All Saints' Day.
It's just common stealing belief systems or claiming that they're part of your belief system to
redressing.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
fit accordingly to our
so that
agenda.
You can attract those people to your faith, of your way of control.
Well, when the church saw such a large success in this plan of holiday manipulation by way of these pagan converts, they decided to just move that whole celebration to November 1st to begin to drain the life out of Samhain the way that they did with Lemuria. I mean, they didn't even change the name of the celebration. It was, let's just move the whole damn thing and suck the life out of the next one.
All in the nature of converts. I mean, that's really what it's all about.
Well, that's what religion does. That's what all the religions do. They take parts of the Bible or whatever, and they only take the parts they want, so they can manipulate the masses or do whatever they need to
whatever fits their agenda. Absolutely.
And that happens. I thought that happened, 1,000 years ago or before that. It just happens today with the cults we have today and stuff.
Time and time again. Yeah, I mean, blacks weren't able to hold the priesthood and Mormon faith, and then all of a sudden it's acceptable,
70s.
Which isn't, I say all of a sudden, but that's their bad, When people start to accept a certain, understanding that we're all equal and blah, 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 basically we're all human beings, we're earthlings, whatever. And then the church has to say, well, look, everybody knows we're all earthlings now, so, fucking let them hang out with us, too.
What bothers me
and
about
it's because we accept it, so they have to accept it for us to accept them.
Right. It's that I'm only going to do this because it gains a continued,
relationship.
Exactly. And what bothers me about that is that within that whole transition, there's never been an apology for we were wrong about this for so long.
How could they?
It's just like with law enforcement. There's no way that we've investigated ourselves and we found we did everything right.
We've investigated ourselves thoroughly.
Yeah.
And just shot him in the back 5 times, but it was in self-defense.
He was backing up with a sword pointed at me from under his arm.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically case closed.
Yep. So it was extremely successful for these guys to continue to basically manipulate these holidays. And before long, people began calling October 31st All Hallows Evening, which later was shortened to All Hallows Even, which just doesn't sound right to me, but it finally rested on All Hallows Eve, which is something that some people still refer to it as in some cases today.
Yeah, I don't even know what it means. What Halloween is that?
Basically, that's not where the name transfers end, though. Some still refer to it as All Hallows Eve, but it later became, after that, Hallow Mass, which meant Mass of the Saints, basically just a rough translation, Mass of the Saints. So it was kind of a way for them to respect their dead or notice, to pay homage in some ways. And
just saints, right?
Yes. And then it finally morphed from Hallow Mass into what we know it as today as Halloween. So it's been half a dozen different names.
Dude, it definitely has a medieval tone to it, man.
It definitely does.
Been around since the fucking medieval time period, like, Renaissance period, Dark Ages, somewhere around there, and that's when it's all started to change. And because after the Roman Empire fell, all that shit, it was the Dark Ages. Nobody knew anybody anymore. People were just trying to survive, and then you get these religious fanatics that come in and they find parts of the Bible or whatever and make up their own religion. People start believing, and
yeah,
it's just crazy shit, man, how it all ties together. But for me, Halloween today is just like any other holiday. It's for kids. You just give the kids fucking candy and go on to the next house,
I know.
That's what it is for me today.
I know that's what it is to most of us, but we don't even, like, we see it as a holiday, but we don't even recognize why we celebrate this holiday. We just dress up, go around giving out or collecting candy, but it's a celebration of something. Yeah. What are we celebrating? We don't even know. We're just like, yay, it's fun time to dress up. And that's what's weird about the holiday to me.
It is a weird holiday.
Well, if you consider it, how many holidays do we know?
I think we know the ones that are pretty much self-explanatory, like Thanksgiving. Pretty much got that one dialed. I know what that one's about.
Christmas,
right.
Easter.
New Year's Eve. It's like, yeah, it's New Year. Yeah, celebrate that. That's why we're celebrating.
Right, but Christmas is awfully skewed.
Yeah, Christmas is definitely one of those. It's a Halloween-y like one.
It's been, we're going to do an episode on Christmas when the time comes.
But so, it's like, what do these things actually mean to us, or do we even take time to consider what they mean, what they represent? What are we celebrating,
Yeah.
It's just a weird ignorance that we all have. And for the most of my life, I've had that same ignorance, like what, never even question it, never even look at what
I'm
the hell
glad
it is.
that I looked into it, because through doing the research to find out what the hell really brought us to what we know as Halloween today, I've learned a new appreciation for a lot of the little things, and kind of reinvigorated a tradition. As a parent, man, I got 2 little kids. It's fun for me to see them dress up and run and get candy, but that's what it was the last couple of years. This year, I've done some research, and it's gotten to be a more fun thing because there's more meaning. And that comes through, the research and the history, the origins, the true Celtic origins, and that respect for where it came from allows for, I don't know, I guess a more rich experience today.
I think it's more connected to nature.
That's
their
and that's
rituals,
the thing
their celebration, that it was thank you from the earth and the cycle of life and the whole planet, like, in just being appreciative of that. That's why I say it's like the New Year's, it's the Thanksgiving, it's Memorial Day. It seems like it's a little bit of everything.
I think Halloween, is celebrating the harvest and respecting the dead. Because that's,
if I'd have to guess, I would say that it's probably one of the more sacred holidays of theirs. It seems like it has a lot of meaning, more than just candy and costumes,
absolutely. When the holiday found America, it was approximately in the 1840s during the potato famine, and along with the potato famine came Irish immigrants in need of work. And this is where one version of the origins of trick-or-treating is said to have began, and the introduction of the holiday to America. And one of these origins of trick-or-treating says that children began celebrating Halloween by committing a series of harmless pranks on their neighbors and local vendors or shop owners, things like stealing their front gate and occasionally in the process freeing their livestock or pushing someone's buggy up to the top of a hay pile. And this is, at least what they say.
The Catholic Church's version of how Halloween started.
Well, it's a couple different places versions. I mean, and not just, and maybe it is all funneled through the Catholic Church's version, but yeah, as far as I know, it's
like kids had a revolution and created a holiday. It's kind of.
It sounds kind of strange, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like all the kids just joined together in a hive mind like mentality and started throwing rocks through fucking windows and demanded candy. You give me candy, I will give this town hell.
But that didn't come until later. I mean, originally it was more mild mannered, and the pranking grew and then became more violent and aggressive with the kids, vandalizing property, throwing rocks through windows, like you said, in around the 1930s, and that's when they say. And like I said, this is just one version of the story because there's obviously when something's diluted and hard to find the real anchor of truth, you're going to have 5 different versions of the story because the history, just like we talked about with the Tesla episode, history is written by the victor, not by the people who deserve the fucking attention.
Yeah, exactly.
So in this case, we've got the history, the victor's version of the history. And in the 1930s, some genius decided to, and I mean that very literally. I mean, this guy, if this is the legitimate way that the story went, this guy is a genius because he decided to bribe these vandals with sweets, things like caramel corn, candy bars, or carameled apples. And those vendors and shop owners who began supplying treats just like this guy were left unharmed by the vandals, and eventually the allure of destruction was completely conquered by sweets, essentially.
I think it sounds like a really cute Disney movie. I think that they should make that into a really nice children's flick,
Oh, I'm sure there's a couple versions.
And then every kid would know the origins of Halloween,
Well, only of trick-or-treating, because that's only the small cross-section of what Halloween is.
That's all they need to tell you.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, fuck, that's more than we already knew before this episode.
Bye. And not the NSYNC version. So, another interesting version, or take on the origins of trick-or-treating, comes from the Middle Ages. And it actually claims that priests believed that on All Saints' Day, because the veil was at its thinnest, if you offered enough prayers to the souls of a deceased loved one who was thought to be trapped in purgatory, you would then release that soul to heaven. And this then led to what became known at the time as souling, in which beggars would begin knocking on doors and begin offering prayers for soul cakes or treats. So, say you've got Uncle Ted, he wasn't a bad guy, but he wasn't a good guy. I'm pretty sure, because he got caught jerking off in the milkshake maker, he's stuck in purgatory. All you have to do is wait for All Saints' Day, wait for the beggars to come to your door, and they will pray for the treats so that Uncle Ted can get all the way to heaven.
I don't know, for jerking off in a milkshake.
Well, that's kind of an Idle Hands reference, but Halloween-y enough.
Yeah. I don't know. He deserves purgatory.
Isn't purgatory like when you're in between worlds you're in between heaven?
Yeah, it's essentially just
wherever.
Kind of the waiting room for heaven or hell, but some people say that it's a fiery place, but not as hot as hell, and it's not.
I think
it's like a second chance place where you're with a bunch of other douchebags like yourself that didn't, like you were just a douchebag in life, so now you're stuck in this place called douchebaggertory. And then and you got to figure out how to get along with these people now and how to make better decisions and prove that you can be heaven worthy.
I think that modern interpretation really summed things up quite nicely.
When I think of purgatory, I think of that squeaky lady from Poltergeist. the squeaky voice lady, remember the Poltergeist movies?
Oh, I'm trying to remember.
Yes.
I mean, that's an excellent Halloween film if you guys haven't watched it.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
No. That's the girl, but there's a lady. She sounds like this.
Right. I just said.
I can't even try to sound like her. It's not doing it any justice.
Yeah.
But
well, Now, the other day, when we were deciding that we were going to do this episode, we were discussing witches and the many different cruel ways that discern somebody to be a witch or not a witch. And one of them was this, what was it? They stack rocks on you.
Oh, okay.
And they would, if you withstood so many amounts or so many rocks that you were a witch. And if it didn't, then it would smash you and you.
Dude, that sounds like Salem Witch Trials shit.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Back in the day, these quote unquote witches would have to go through these trials, these really horrendous things, like another one with the water, where they would basically say, lay on your back in the lake or pond.
Or walk on water.
And they would stack, what was it, stones?
Probably similar, like a certain amount of stones.
On their chest and say, if you float, you're a witch.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're
dead anyways.
fucking dead.
So the logic was pretty, not very well thought out back then, I guess. They're fuck, let's just drown them just in case.
Those Puritans were crazy back then, dude. That was like 1600s before.
Well, Puritans, that wasn't like, it probably had nothing to do with their religious beliefs, right? Like it probably had the way that they overreacted. It probably had nothing to do.
Just someone told somebody else, that this girl's possessed by the devil. I forgot the chick's name, but we've all seen.
Right.
We all. I mean, I remember reading books or. Well, you can talk about the.
Before we get too deep into the Salem Witch Trials, you and I were discussing something, and we can't really pin it down. But tell us the story of.
Read it somewhere, or I saw it in a video or something. It was like
one version of the origins.
And I guess it was they had already determined these to be witches or whatever, and they had option of like bobbing for apples or instant death if you got the apple. Not instant death, probably torture and death, but guaranteed
we'll
death.
We'll burn you at the stake.
And so if they were able to retrieve an apple on the first go, then they would be set free. But what I guess wasn't apparent is that it was like really, really scaldingly hot oil. And that's what they were dunking or going to splash their faces into. And I guess probably only the first one did it. And the other one was like, you know what, fuck it, just kill me. I mean, what's the...
Where was this at? Was this like in Europe or America?
You got what I know, origins. Man. That's basically it. Because I tried, after we talked about it, I was trying to look up and see a more nailed down story of that, where it happened, when it happened, and was unable to. But either way, somebody said it somewhere, and I'm just running with it.
It's awesome. I mean, not that it ever happened, if it ever happened, but the whole concept of it is just
did. Look what atrocious. They did to the people they believe to be witches. It's not outside the realm of possibility.
Fuck no. I mean, if anything, it was mild in consideration.
Yeah, at least they got an option to go free.
Yeah.
There wasn't many of those given out back then.
If they made away, they didn't make away with a face or much.
Yeah, like, you're
to be resembling a face.
Then they just round you up tomorrow. Oh, you're a witch. Like, how do you know you survived the oil?
The blame
splash.
Yeah,
back then, dude.
Well, and I think that a lot of it was just sensationalism, which luckily we don't have any of that in today's culture.
No,
luckily not in the media.
No,
we live in a really
balanced and kind of just really well dialed.
Yeah, thank Todd for that.
Thank Todd.
So in the earliest 20th century,
Todd?
I don't know, the guy that we're thanking for everything.
He's a good guy.
That's who Todd is.
Nice.
Now, in the early 20th century, artists really can take responsibility for the orange and black theme, as well as the perception of Halloween being associated with spooky things like ghosts, spiders, bats, witches, and all of that spooky shit. Now, one way they gained the influence was through a thing called the Denison books. And the specifics of these was, one was the Bogey book, and the other was the Party magazine. And these came out in the 1900s, the early 1900s. I think 1906 or something was one of the earliest covers I saw. And these basically just contained how-tos, and it was a catalog of supplies that eventually included things like the first commercial costumes. And again, I don't know exactly when they started, but they had a lot to do with the way that Halloween developed in the early 20th century, in the early 1900s. And, they began doing all kinds of things with parades. And I think Allentown, Pennsylvania was the first one in 1909. And then the one there's one in Minnesota that's still going to this day that started in the early 20s, Halloween parade. So it's definitely a commercial thing now.
Well, I think it shows you that people really want to connect to other people, and really, we'll use excuses like Halloween to go around and collect treats from people that on every other day we consider to be dangerous and you wouldn't take food from them. Isn't it a weird thing? That's
an excellent point.
But we go around and we allow our kids to run around to these houses, but on the next day, those are dangerous strangers.
Don't eat the fruit.
But there's this one day a year where we let down our guard and we say, you know what, I trust everybody and everyone, and I'm going to go out and have fun with, whoever and whatever and wherever.
They don't ask you.
And that's what I think is awesome about it. But if we could stay in that moment all the time and trust each other like we trust each other on Halloween, it could be really...
There could be some good positives, it's beneficial things that come out of it. I agree.
A weird thing that we do, It's just like, okay, everything's cool now. And now really it's back to shit.
And, I really think that's probably one of the reasons I enjoy Halloween so much is because I have a bit of a social ineptitude. I'm not, and maybe that's because I don't really love the idiocy that we all have to deal with.
Well, do you know what's funny about it also is like you put on a mask and you become yourself, because then you can actually be who you are by putting on a mask is a strange thing too, because you're masking yourself, but at the same time you're letting go of all of your inhibitions and the ego things and judgment and all that, because it's just that day where you just let go.
Kind of creates some anonymity for yourself,
but it's also it creates like he said, an escape for your inner self. It lets your soul play.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people out there who build like haunted houses in their backyards and shit,
Oh, absolutely. They go all crazy. And there's a name for them. They're haunters. In fact, I watched. That's one of the things that I watched that gave me that Wes Craven quote was these guys that go out and they spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years on their own personal haunted houses.
That's crazy.
And some of them get so engulfed in it that they just lose sight of the rest of the year and they're working on this damn haunted house.
I think this is probably one of the holidays that people are just the most passionate about. There's not other holidays that you're like, I just can't wait for it.
That's a good point.
Unless you're a kid and it's Christmas.
When I was younger, man, some people would like give us like apples and oranges and shit, and we just throw them away because, you always hear about people putting razor blades in apples.
There's never actually found a single case of that ever happening. That was a story that somebody wrote and the world overreacted. It sounds like an H.G. Wells, maybe? War of the Worlds?
I just wouldn't go to like government establishments or FBI.
Do not
That's
trust
probably
Plum
the
Island
ones that
candy.
give you the injected fucking candy bars,
Do not trick or treat at Plum Island.
What's that? Plum Island?
That's where they took all of the Project Paperclip biological testing people, and that's where they developed. It's fairly close to Lyme, Pennsylvania, Lyme disease.
Wow!
Look, we'll do an episode on Plum Island.
Sounds like I need to do some research.
Deal. So the funny thing is everything that we do these days in Halloween. It gives us an opportunity to dress up as anyone. We could be the scariest slasher from the most recent horror flick, a superhero from our favorite comic, or a slutty pumpkin, a whorish giraffe, or a sexy cop. So this has to be generating a lot of money. Halloween generates a staggering $5 billion a year.
I wouldn't doubt it, man. It's super commercialized. Yeah, it's getting to the point where it's going to be like Christmas when they start having Black Friday for Halloween costumes and shit.
Well,
it's like a close second to Christmas, actually.
Not very close, actually. Let's consider that people are buying up gifts.
It is the second one.
Yeah. It is. In fact, both of you are right to some degree. It's second only. Halloween is second only to Christmas, which generates a staggering $450 billion annually.
Jesus.
Man,
we're stupid.
That's $445 billion more than Halloween.
Daddy, I want this. Okay, I'll get you.
Yeah, and then we're just going to let it collect dust. How
much?
$450 billion for Christmas. And this is all just fuel for our Yule episode, which is really the true tradition of Christmas, which, again, where does it come from? Oh, pagan and Celtic origins.
I know, so that's why you got to get back to that. But we talked about that too. Like, we're looking back at cultures and saying maybe they got something right and we're not, we should pay attention to where this all originated. But what if in the future we're looking back at Christianity and Catholicism and Mormonism and there's a whole nother idea of religion in the future, and then there's those ones who are questioning that religion. They look back at Mormonism and say, look, I think these guys had it dialed, man.
Yeah.
And we're over here looking back at the pagans saying maybe these guys are onto something. But maybe they weren't. Maybe it was just the same controls. It's all the maybe it's all just the same control, but they seem to have more real values with nature and things that seem to have real meaning versus our whatever we have.
I think the whole concept of Samhain, of this harvest, of this respect for what is about to come, this ultimate acceptance of the winter, this cold death, essentially. That's something that's taught me to appreciate what's about to come for us too. And if you consider what's potentially there around the corner with all this stupid Ebola shit, if that really ended up leaking out into the public and we had this modern Middle Ages, we would have to consider things like these. We would have
modern Black Death.
Exactly. But we would have to launch ourselves back in time in the way that they did things. We'd have to go back to growing our own vegetables and fruits, and we'd have to raise our own livestock. We'd have to be more community oriented, which is already what these people have told us they did to begin with. So why did we stray so far from it? And again, I think it has a lot to do with what the church wanted, and unfortunately, it's the same thing that money produces, and that's greed.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point.
It's sad.
It is
because
sad.
A lot of people hide under religion as a protected place. It's a sacred. It's a sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows how many of these people actually realize they're being taken advantage of?
Sanctuary.
Is it? Exactly. That's the thing.
I guess if a sanctuary is like all closed walls and you just live in this little safe space.
Sure, that sounds like a padded room. You need a straitjacket for that place.
Don't go outside it.
Right, but some people need a straitjacket to believe some of the things that we're supposed to believe in religion. That's another thing that bothers me. And I don't mean to turn this into a religion episode. Cool. I think that it has a lot to do with what happened with the bastardization of this holiday, of this festival.
I think that we will, in the future, look back at this time and say that this is when the cults died, the religious, ideological cults, of thinking and ways of structuring your thinking and all that. Like it's going to be like, why did we do that?
This group dependency, right? That we're going to kill. Essentially,
the cults. I just think people will start to outthink the religions.
But I think why is it working? And that's what I'm trying to get to with this whole cult, this whole group mind thing. I think that a lot of people are, again, they're comfortable with, if that guy believes it, I like that guy. I mean, even if you go as simple as, a girl that likes a guy says, I like him, and then she goes to one of his classes, a yoga class, so to speak. Then she gets into whatever. Long story short, it becomes some obsession that I just like what he likes because it's safe. And we end up with this group mind because it's safe.
Yeah, I don't buy into the dogma either, man. I think there's valuable lessons to be learned from certain religions. All of them have a good teaching or lesson, or most of them are about love and respecting each other.
I'm glad you said that.
If you take most of it as like philosophy and a way to kind of live your life, but not so much be controlled by that. Just
exactly.
I think there's good parts of it, and then there's limiting parts to who you are and limiting you to your ability to think further than this certain ideology.
Yeah.
So I think there's pros and cons with it, but I think it's more limiting to who you are than it is beneficial to what it can be.
With what it's become, though, you have to look at if we look at the origins of it, I'm sure that with the church itself, I'm sure there was even more pure origins. I'm sure that it had a more respectable beginning. And then
really
again, it was corrupted as far as like the ideology of it. The person that put together these structural beliefs potentially could have had a more positive ideology behind it.
I think it's been control since day one. Like you go all the way back to, as far as I know anyways, like Egypt and Horus, and he has the same story as Jesus Christ. Death, resurrection, 3 kings gave him shit, like it's the same story. December 25th, born a virgin.
There's a lot of cultures that share that
exact same story, but what it really symbolizes is mostly the movement of the sun and all that, but why are we being deceived in thinking it's actually a person or a god or something else repetitively over and over? This one dies and then another one comes along. This one dies, another one comes along. Is it a story or is somebody really coming along?
Well, that's a good point. I think that originally it was designed with good intentions. And I think that it was more designed as an outline, not an arrow. And people have just hopped on that fucking thing and wrote it like it is a bus to drive on, rather than just, like we said, using it as an outline. That's kind of my impression of it. I feel like a lot of religions, and again, with how many fucking religions do we have now? There's probably 50 of them. There's a religion that's legitimately been recognized by, society as the Pastafarians, who wear fucking pasta strainers on their heads and they praise the spaghetti monster. The flying spaghetti monster is their god. And sure, it sounds like a joke, and maybe it is even to them, but it's, I don't know.
I believe in the flying spaghetti monster.
It sounds like a joke, but
yeah.
I don't mean to make fun of your religion, Jared. Both of you. Fuck,
don't listen to him, bro. You'll be wearing one of these hats too.
I didn't want to say anything, but you guys look really good. No, I mean, I don't mean to bash on any religions like I was trying to get across. I think that most, if not all of them, started with a good intention, but not everything gets finished that way.
You should just take out all of the dogma and the people and the history of the churches and just do away with the whole trying to prove whose is right, because it's kind of stupid, really. Because your whole belief system, and it kind of hinges on how you are acting morally and how you go about your life.
And in essence, that's what religion is.
And
a group of values that people live by.
Exactly. And for the most part, those values see eye to eye with all these, through all the different religions and all that. So if you just, it's all the history and dogma, and this is how it's factual that makes it argumentative or whatever. And so it's just weird. It's like, just eliminate all the proving shit and go with philosophy. I mean, most people, I guess maybe people need that history to cling to it being 100% fact. And that's why they're constantly trying to prove that it is, been throughout time. And this is, there was a place in time here that proves that.
Something that bothers me about that is that somebody that's a religious fanatic, and I don't mean to attack it, but somebody that's a religious fanatic that will come and they will just say, oh, I know because the Savior said so, or the Savior tells me, or the Savior's spirit is strong. Well, you know what? Not everybody shares your, connection. If there really is a connection with that spirit, or is that just your
conscious
backup? Yeah, you're just filling that gap with, if I don't say this, something scary could happen. It's a fear-induced introduction, and I think that's the part where we're starting
to like get into cults here.
Religion.
That's like the dark side of it, dude. When you have the power to manipulate people and you kind of just push your beliefs on them and you repeat that over and over again, after a while, I don't care who you are, you'll start to believe that, and then you'll drink the punch. The
religions
you'll drink
to you.
You'll drink the red Kool-Aid.
Your beliefs to suck you into theirs, like they did with pagan
Waco,
Samhain,
Texas,
and created Halloween. It's the same thing. They just use what you believe and say, yeah, we believe that too. Like the Mormons, they didn't used to really identify with Christianity so much. And I mean, they did, but they didn't go out of their way to say, yeah, we believe in Jesus Christ and Christianity. Yeah. But now they want to portray more Christianity-like qualities.
I think that's what happened with Halloween too.
And name themselves Christians so that they can attract more Christian people with those beliefs so that obviously they can control and take some of their money.
Yeah.
The Celts are polytheistic, They believed in more than one God and stuff. And I'm pretty sure they, applied, principles of Halloween to that. But then when Christianity rose, they kind of just, like you said, they just turn it into something else, Well, yeah, they distort it.
They found a way to manipulate it by doing it almost kindly. And they didn't do it kindly at all, but they dressed it up like it's, hey, we're gonna share a holiday too, right? Originally, with the whole manipulation in the 7th century, they began by dropping their holiday directly on top of and co-opting on top of the pagan holiday, and so by doing that, they introduced their beliefs into the other beliefs, and
it's like naming Zeus, the Greek god of Zeus, Jupiter, which is the Roman god of of thunder. Same kind of deal. That's what I think Christianity just twisted Halloween around a little bit, and they still kept some of the good pagan stuff.
Exactly.
And then
they manipulated and picked and chose what they wanted, what fit the agenda.
And that could be applied to like everyday society if you look at it. Like that's what a lot of religions do today. That's what politicians do.
Should go out of our way to figure out what we're celebrating and what we're actually, doing on all these holidays. Like if we're just doing it, participating because we have always participated, like maybe it's time to start asking questions. What are we participating in?
Yeah, why?
Why these specific times? Like Christmas, isn't that the winter solstice? That's right. Christmas.
Yeah,
or Yule, and then you have like holidays that land on all these, the equinox days, the solstices, and alignments of
well, they obviously looked up at the sky a lot.
So the worship seems to be kind of driven more towards the sun. Like that would be the god. That's the one that provides the light. That's the one that gives life to the world. Without the sun, there is none. To me, that's what they worship. Most of these cultures, and even the Egyptians, the sun god, and the pineal gland, and all of the things that they worshipped. It's almost like they worshipped the pineal gland, which is activated by the sun god, kind of thing. Like I don't know if that's even close, but that's my interpretation of that history. And then if you look at the Catholic Church, they have like a massive pine cone at the Vatican, which is a symbol of the pineal gland, which maybe they worship that same thing too, and that's God, And then the church downtown, the Salt Lake City Temple, has the all-seeing eye on it, and it's another symbol, and there's suns all over it, and there's moon and astrological symbolism. The
all-seeing eye again can be associated with the pineal gland.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I'm getting at, is the all-seeing eye is the pineal gland. The pine cone is the pineal gland.
Just to reiterate, what is the pineal gland?
It's the third eye.
Oh, okay.
And some say that fluoride is calcifying those and basically rendering them useless.
I think what they worship is they worship God, and that is your third eye, your higher self. You are God, and I think that the sun
within yourself
wakes that up in you, and I don't. We all use it to a degree. And, everybody's like, "Oh, I was just thinking about you," and then you called. We all have this higher self, so to speak. This all-knowing
subconscious access.
Yeah, it's
that draws itself up. Almost, and sometimes it draws itself up when it needs to be used the most. You'll get that. And some people consider it a mother's intuition can be associated to it, or
dangerous.
Or you get that like somebody's gonna. I'm just thinking about this guy, and then you get a phone call from him, or like you said, a dangerous situation, and you've got to get out.
You just feel like, oh man, I got to get out of here, and you get out of there, and then the next day you hear that there was
Final
a gunshot
Destination.
Or something else happened.
You don't get on the plane. Devin Sawa didn't. That's 2 Devin Sawa movies in one podcast.
So you don't think it's based on coincidence or nothing like that? There's just some inner energy or something?
I don't know what, I mean, I think there's so much to try to understand about consciousness and reality and who we are, what we are. I'm just scratching the surface, man. I'm just getting at ideas and not really the foundation of the things. You know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to figure shit out, man.
There's a lot of things that human beings don't understand, and to me, this is one of them.
Of course it is, and we
your
don't
third eye, whatever you're talking about. I'm thinking of that triangle thing with the Egyptian eyeball or something.
Yeah, that's
is that what you guys?
Well, no, you know,
to?
like the
Eye of Ra.
Eye of Ra, exactly.
Is that it?
Yeah,
because I see like fortune
the Egyptian,
tellers,
the one that looks like a tribal eye. The Egyptian, it looks kind of like a tribal eye kind of thing. That's what has been speculated is the pineal gland.
It's not on my mind.
The way it looks when you cut the brain in half, right down like the pineal gland, that's what it looks like, is that all-seeing eye of Ra, I guess. That's what I've basically heard, is that's what it looks like. I haven't actually seen the pineal gland cut in half.
I've seen, again, diagrams of it, and as far as you can tell, and I've even seen a actual photograph of a brain cut and you know, cross-sectioned with it, you know, with the overlay of the pineal gland and the all-seeing.
Is it an actual organ in your brain?
It's a gland.
It's a gland at the base of your brain.
Oh, wow. And this, what do you, how does it associate with your, like, anatomy of your, you know, brain?
That's still to be determined.
I wish
fully.
So scientists don't really know.
I'm sure some of them.
I'm just looking at what they show, what they depict on their buildings, and just deciphering what it means. Like trying
There's
to
something
understand
more to it.
Basically, what I'm saying is, I think that's what it is. That's what they're keeping you from understanding, and I think that's what our full potential lies in, that understanding that we do have a way to tap into clairvoyance and things of that nature. I think all of us have the potential to be psychic, so to speak, or, you know, but we have been taught from the beginning how
it's impossible, or how to be afraid of that kind of thing.
Yeah, almost. Exactly. But also like critical thinking, and it's not really allowed. We're taught like what to think, not how to think. And so we never really get to those deeper parts of what we are, because we just automatically know the answer from what we've been told. You know, I don't know.
We've been
confusing.
Almost programmed to expect an answer, so we don't chase one on our own. And that goes, you know, along the lines of cultural programming and the deception that is built into that. But again, another episode for another day.
No doubt.
So
more research
speaking
required.
On this episode, what is the specifics of what we celebrate in this holiday, really? I mean, is it candy? Is it trick-or-treating? Is it costumes? Is it to be afraid of the dead? I mean, what, as far as what we've talked about, Josh, what do you think this holiday is? What do you...
I think it's... I honestly want to change my traditions. You know, what I've done, I want to change it to a more like a Thanksgiving and New Year's Eve, Halloween, you know.
Right. A mutual respect.
Like a Memorial Day, all of those holidays rolled into one, and try to create a tradition based on those values, I guess, because I really don't know what to do with it. I mean, I just feel like it's ignorant to just go on trick-or-treating. And that, you know, and to not acknowledge that there's a deeper meaning to this day. You know, I think that's important for us to try to figure out what that meaning is.
Absolutely.
and act accordingly.
I agree with you there. What about you, Jared? Is this something that you have ever taken into consideration outside of doing this episode? Or is it something that since we've done it, do you see it any differently?
I would think so. Kind of in some ways, like for me, like Halloween was just about communicating with the dead, because that's what they did back then. They tried to contact loved ones and stuff like that. And it was also associated with the harvest. You know, that was the time you get your crops and save up for, you know, stockpile food for the winter.
Yeah.
But today it's just commercialized into go to the store, buy a bunch of candy, give it to kids.
That's a $5 billion industry.
Like candy and costumes. It's huge, man. And that's what it is today. It's just become commercialized. All the other stuff you were talking about earlier, nobody really knows about that. No, I don't even think people really care. I don't know. I mean, I think it's good trivia.
That's a damn good,
good
point,
stuff to
I
know.
think people don't realize they care until they hear something and they say, "Wait a minute."
But when I was younger, that's what I remember.
with you,
Halloween, you're trying to contact the dead.
Yeah,
they're easier to contact.
That's exactly right.
Go to a graveyard and break out your Ouija board. That's what I never did that because I'm too damn afraid of those things. But that's what you fucking do. You go, try to contact your loved ones or whoever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You contact Uncle Bob who lived back in 1790, and you're like, you talk about it.
Where'd you bury the gold, Bob?
Yeah,
That kind of stuff. But today,
we got a lot of uncles that died in this show too. We got Ted that ended up doing some gnarly things with the milkshake maker, and then we got Bob, who's some sort of rich entrepreneur or at least a gold miner.
Yeah.
Hid his treasure.
Or he was a
dude, like Uncle Rhodes,
Oh, that
Uncle
would be
Rose.
a good one
There
too.
you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is going to be the next episode. So for me, this holiday definitely, after doing the research, I, like you, Josh, have decided to take my perception of the whole thing, and my traditions are going to change from this year on. I think that I'm going to incorporate and maybe just, and maybe generate my own traditions but in respect and in, the light of what originally happened,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that, reevaluating what we really should be celebrating, or at least what we should acknowledge during the celebrations.
Exactly.
Have fun, but fucking notice something.
Yeah, at least recognize what you're celebrating and why you're celebrating it. Like you got to eat vegetables this year. That's pretty awesome. Cool,
Yeah.
man. You should,
Dude.
that's why you're saying, hey, let's dress up and be.
We invite all you people listening out there. I want to hear your opinions, about Halloween and where they think it originates, or where some of these cultures come, like candy corn. Where does that come from?
Well, that
I don't
comes
know.
from
How old is that?
1985. Every single candy corn in existence came from one batch made in 1985.
Shut
And
up.
when they were so horrible, they just continued to recycle them, and we just can't get rid of them.
I'm so naive.
Kind of like McDonald's.
Were you really into it?
They taste old, man. You might be onto something, dick.
Who knows, dude? Maybe it's like the secret fry sauce recipe, and that's why you can't get into the temple unless you have the sweet garb. There's true secrets, man, and candy corns and fry sauce. Those are true secrets we're going to uncover here on Odd Reality Radio.
Before it's over, that's for sure.
Well, for those of you that are interested in contacting us, please feel free to do so at info@oddrealityradio.com. And in the meantime, continue to investigate life through the lens of possibility. I'm Ty West.
I'm Joshua Ray.
Jared Black.
Take care.
Peace.
See you guys. Dude, I was at Home Depot today. I got a weird story, but some fucking old guy's talking to my dad. He's like, yeah, we're being watched right now all the time. The government keeps track of, this is an employee, the government keeps track of all your spending, what time you go to sleep, when you wake up. And I was all like, cool, man, I just came here for some drill bits. But no, I was like, I agreed with them. And then he started talking about like politics. And I feel like if I just said anything opposite to this guy, like, he's all, you don't ever vote. And I'm like, yeah, I don't. You don't know I don't vote. Because why should I? The corporations are the ones that do all the voting.
Yeah.
And he was a nice guy, but I was just like, yeah.
Freedom for drill bits,
Yeah.
Not like, I don't want to solve the world's problems with you right now.
Sometimes I don't have it in me. But
Usually on Sundays, I don't have it in me. You hit me up on a Friday night, and I've got a bit of juice to go.
Sundays are my days of rest.
Sundays are for me.